Greetings, listeners. This is Jennifer. I voice Harper for the Zombie Apocalypse Survivor Radio. And I want to thank you personally for listening. And I want to tell you about my new Substack, which I'm hoping you will consider subscribing to. I pretty much do this podcast single-handedly in my spare time. And anything that you could do to help me out, I would greatly appreciate. The podcast will always be free. I am very committed to that. So if you are enjoying this and cannot afford to do more than listen, thank you for listening, and I hope you recommend me to your friends. But if you can afford a little more and want to get the podcast episodes early, want to get some additional writings set in the kingdom of the undead, I would love it if you would subscribe to my Substack. I appreciate you listening, and I thank you so much for being here. As always, feel free to reach out at zasurvivorradio@gmail.com, or if you go to the Substack, which is the Zompocalypse Survivor Radio Substack, also Za Survivor Radio, reach out to me there. I would love to hear from you and connect with you. And if you have any stories in this setting you'd like to tell, send them in and I will read them aloud. I appreciate all of you, and I will let you get back to the podcast. Welcome to the end of the world, survivors. You are tuned into this station, one of the last voices on the airwaves. I'm Harper, broadcasting from a radio station that somehow still hums with life. I am no longer alone, and my friends and I are looking for the author of Robert's Rules of Chaos while we rebuild and forge new alliances. This is where we build our society. There is no going back. But as we forge forward, creating a new world order, I'll share stories of your fellow survivors and how the Robert's Rules of Chaos have helped them survive, or at least given them some goalposts to focus on. I'll be your guide through the madness, sharing the locations of safe havens, theories, and information about our new world, and the occasional existential crisis that comes with a zompocalypse. The world's gone dark, the dead outnumber the living, but we are surviving and rebuilding. The old world is gone, but we are adapting to surviving in this new world and the new rules that come with surviving the zombie menace. Stick around if you're still alive. Welcome, survivors. This is DJ Harper. We're going to take a bit of a break from our deep dive into Robert's Rules of Chaos. Robert, if you're out there, we're still looking for you, and we're still trying to share your words with as many people as we can share them with. So if you are still alive and able to, let us know. We would really like to talk to you. Make sure you're okay, because we are very much enjoying the rules that you've laid out, and many of the communities that have been built are adopting them. So if you're out there, Robert, you let us know. If anybody's run into a man distributing these rules, let us know. Any rumors of Robert are also welcome. Today we're going to talk about a different set of rules. These are the rules that every community sets up for their people. And I'll be real honest, there are some communities out there who have rules that I would not be comfortable following. But that's how you know that that community isn't a good fit for you. It doesn't need to be a fight. It doesn't need to be a power struggle. We have a lot of communities going on. We have a lot of communities all over the place. So if you find a community that has a set of rules that you don't feel comfortable with, it's okay to move on to a community that does have rules that you would feel comfortable with. I'll be real honest, there are some places out there that are run a little like a cult and have some rules and regulations that I would not follow. I will say that any community that does not do a strip search before you enter is putting everybody in that community at risk. But a community that has a strip search with a member of the opposite sex who is leering at you is going to be off-putting for a lot of people, and they aren't going to want to come into that community. The communities that are doing it right and doing it well usually have a person of the same gender doing strip search. We ask anyone who is trans what gender they would prefer to be there to be witness to the fact that they don't have any bites on them. But considering how many people are bitten on the butt and bitten in places that are normally hidden, the strip search really is for community safety. But it has to be done in a way that also provides a sense of safety and a sense of comfortability for people. Um, we even allow people to come in by twos if they're comfortable with it, and we tell them both, "Hey, if a bite's discovered, the first thing that happens is the person goes zombie and bites whoever's closest. So that is a risk that you will be taking." Usually whoever is conducting the strip search is behind a barricade of some sort that they can see through. I know that at the plant, they have an entire setup where the person doing the strip search is, like, in a separate room. It's almost like they're looking through a very sturdy window, basically. Anyway, there are some places that have rules that I would not be comfortable with, and that is okay. You know, we're gonna see a lot of different communities form. We're gonna see probably more than 1 or 2 cults form, and while I don't think that is great, it is the nature of humanity. Even in society, we had many, many cults operating. Cults happen where humans happen. And so you find a community with rules that you are not aligned with, it's okay to go to a different community. And most of the communities out there, even some of the cults, know about other communities because they work with each other. There has to be a certain amount of trading of goods and services between communities. You know, where we are here, we trade food with several different communities, and they trade goods and services with us quite a lot. And in that way, we're all interdependent upon each other. And we can all operate independently while still having this interdependence with trade. So there's usually a list of different communities you can go to. So if the only community you have found does not align with what you want as far as the rules, please, please find another one, because not following the rules of a community can really lead to some messed up things happening. Where we are in Southern Illinois, a community actually formed in an old Verizon building, which at the time of the apocalypse was a Frontier building because Frontier had bought out the Verizon buildings. And these were not cell phone places, these were landline places. Probably built back in the 60s or 70s. These buildings contain all of the old tech. Gosh, just rows and rows and rows of old tech for landline phones. But most of these buildings are basically concrete bunkers almost. There's usually one door that is a steel sturdy door, and the walls are a foot thick, if not bigger, of concrete. So they're very well protected. They're very well insulated too. You know, coolish in the summer, warmish-ish in the winter. Um, no wind getting through regardless. So there was a community that formed in one of these buildings. And it was formed by there was a traveling janitor who would clean these buildings, thought, this one's really sturdy. And so when the apocalypse happened, he brought everybody there that he was with. And from there, as they scavenged and went on zombie hunting raids, they gathered more people, saved a lot of people. And one of their rules was no fires inside. And this was an important rule because of the way these buildings were set up. And, they would get camp stoves and different things like that where you could cook things without it being a smoky fire, right? The no fire inside was mitigated by little sterno cans to heat something up, that kind of thing. So there was some leeway with it. And the problem is once people stop paying attention to the rules and or don't understand why the rules are there, they feel like the rules don't apply to them or that the rules are arbitrary and therefore, since they're arbitrary, they're unimportant. And most of the communities have these rules for a very specific reason, like the strip search rule. We have that rule here at the station because so many other communities have been completely wiped out because one zombie bite got through. And as soon as the bitten go inside and are around 20 to 100 people, they immediately turn, bite the person closest, and it spreads like wildfire. And sometimes no one makes it out. Sometimes no one makes it out alive. And by not following the rules, they have created more for the zombie army to, go with Robert's Rules of Chaos's theory on this. So these rules are pretty important. Well, this community, a large contingent of this community, most of them founders of the community, leaders of the community, the traveling janitor, whose name he asked me not to share, is, they were gone. They were traveling to a different community in order to trade some of the goods they had in order to get something else, right? Well, because they were gone and they were the ones who would remind people of the rules, and keep in mind, the rules are posted very visibly for everyone to see. But they had some new people arrive who became part of the community who probably weren't paying attention to the rules. And there's a big open space in this building where a lot of the equipment is housed. And these new people came in and they built a fire, which, other than dying of smoke inhalation, because there's not really a lot of ventilation in these buildings, sounds harmless until you know that these frontier buildings have fire suppression systems. And those systems are argon, which will quell fire and human life. So they built a fire, and the best guess that the survivors had, because those that survived were not there when this all went down, was people got drunk, got very stupid, and built a fire because it was cold. Um, you know, we are here in March, but there are still some really, really cold times depending on where you're located. So they built a fire. The fire set off the suppression system. The argon quelled the fire, and everybody died. A few people who were close by the doors made it out in time, but part of the whole fire suppression system is the doors shut automatically. So not everybody made it out. We lost an entire community almost that way. And the leaders of that community were pretty devastated because by the time they came back, everybody in that room was a zombie. Um, so they did clean out the building of zombies because these doors were basically choke points. So they were able to come back, clear out the zombies, and rip them, you know. Um, and they actually used this as an opportunity. They decided to burn the bodies, and a fire that large, when zombies did show up, they basically were on the roof and taking out as many zombies that showed up as they could, as you do when zombies show up. There was a lot of times, especially in the early years of the zombie apocalypse, where we didn't know that the zombies take it personally and will follow you if you kill too many of them, that people just spent their time just target practicing. Because at this point, if you don't know how to defend yourself, you're not going to last long. So learning how to shoot, learning how to aim, all of those skills are pretty important. And so they used it as a chance to teach those skills from a safe distance because, zombies aren't going to climb up a building. They can't, you know. I know the movie World War Z, makes them like ants, but no, that's not how they operate. So anyway, the whole point of this is they had a rule not to start fires inside, which, honest to God, is not an unreasonable rule. Like, if you do not have a chimney and proper ventilation, starting a fire inside is a boneheaded move at best. You know, smoke inhalation, asphyxiation, all of that is a very real threat. And there are a lot of people in the zombie apocalypse who have died because they haven't thought all the way through their actions. For every action you take, there is a series of reactions that happen. I don't know if anybody remembers, there was a Sesame Street where this girl goes, "I wonder what would happen if I popped this balloon. I wonder what would happen if I popped this balloon behind Bobby." And it shows her popping the balloon behind Bobby and Bobby jumping in fright. "I wonder what would happen if I popped this balloon behind Bobby while he's on the skateboard." And it shows her popping the balloon behind Bobby while he's on the skateboard, and because of fear, he rides off on his skateboard and gets into an accident and breaks his arm. And the whole point of that little cartoon was try to think through the potential effects of your actions. Actions have consequences. And sometimes those consequences are good for you. Sometimes those consequences are bad for you. But for every action you take, you're changing something in a way that has almost a chain reaction of events. So here, I wonder what would happen if we all got drunk. I wonder what would happen if we all got drunk and stupid and started a fire. I wonder what would happen if we broke this rule. And a lot of times, the people who have been in the community for a while know exactly why the rules are there. Most of these rules were made from experience of the people in this community. They know from experience that if you start a fire in this room, everyone will die because of the argon suppression system. They know that if you house someone who is terminal in an entire room full of people, you're risking that person turning and then turning everybody else. Because, death isn't safe either. That's why most communities have their sick bays or hospitals or wounded in a completely separated, fenced-off area. And the people who volunteer there are usually pretty well equipped. I have seen doctors basically wearing leathers that can withstand being bitten, you know, which is smart because sometimes you're trying to save a patient and you don't. And then if you're not fast enough to rip them before they bite you, you're gone too. And as we all know, we can't afford to lose any doctors or nurses or nurse practitioners or veterinarians for that matter. Not just because we have been training veterinarians to work on humans, but also because we have a lot of animals. We have a lot of animals that we are taking care of, and they need vet care, you know? The number of veterinarian offices we have rated just for medications for the various creatures we have here at the station has been at all of them in the area, for sure. And, any pharmacy we go to that happens to also sell medication for animals, we're taking all of that as well, because we need it. At a certain point, there's not going to be any more flea medication, and we're going to have to figure out how to keep fleas off our cats, you know? And so, anyway, that is pretty much um, my little lecture on there's a reason why we have these rules for these communities. Now, this frontier building, they cleared everybody out. They were able to use the fire to take shots at the incoming zombies, give some of the new people experience because, they had brought back a dozen or two people with them. So they have cleared everything out, made the building safe, and they have also worked to raid various places for their solar panels. They apparently have somebody who knows how to hook up solar panels and power the building so that the building has adequate heat and cooling, because in this area, summer months are super hot and winter months are super cold. So that is something that they have been working on. So they are very sad to have lost those people. And it is absolutely a tragedy. But like we all have done after tragedy, you clean up, you rebuild, and you hope more people come in. But every time a tragedy like this occurs, a new rule for a community is written. And if you're not comfortable following the rules of a community, you need to find a different community. And some communities are pretty understanding if you break a rule or two. They usually, on a first offense, take you aside, explain to you why the rule exists, what the repercussions are when people in the past have done whatever rule you've broken. They try to let you know, hey, this is why we have this rule. This is why it's important to follow it. And this is what we're trying to create here in this community. And most good communities have rules that keep everybody safe. And when that is the case, they usually try to explain what you did wrong, ask that you don't do it again, and move on. A lot of times a first offense, slap on the wrist. But pretty much every community I've run into, second offense is exile. You aren't welcome anymore because you cannot follow the rules and you have to leave. And forgetting the rules is not really something that is an option, because the rules of the communities are put in place to keep you safe. And, back in the world, when there was a world, the United States of America had a lot of weird, insane rules. Like there was a rule in Colorado where people couldn't have rain barrels. There were weird, messed up rules that didn't make a whole lot of sense. I lived in Illinois, and the fact that marijuana was not legal in other states was just insane to me, considering alcohol was. Because, I don't know, You give me a high person or a drunk person, I want the high person. Drunk people lack a certain amount of logic, and as someone who has been drunk before, there's not a lot of reasoning with them. Whereas with high people, they're a little slow, a little stupid, maybe have the munchies. There's not really a whole lot of let's do something outrageously dumb. There's no, hey, hold my bong, like there is, hey, hold my beer, right? But at the station, we don't really have rules about that kind of thing. Because I'll be real honest, when it comes to zombie apocalypse land, sometimes you need to get a little drunk or you need to get a little high just to cope with whatever horror you have seen that day. I try to put a very good spin on things here, but we are seeing horrible stuff every single day. And, we're seeing so much horror on the daily that it's hard to process it all. And, when you're using chemicals, you aren't exactly processing it, you're avoiding it, but I totally get self-medication as a coping mechanism. That's something people are going to do. However, when it becomes all you're doing, it becomes a bit of a problem. It's hard to be productive if you're hungover all the time. So anyway, there are some communities out there that have rules against any kind of chemicals like that. No drugs, no alcohol, no nothing. And I understand where they're coming from. But without more therapists around to talk through things with people, coping mechanisms are hard to come by. And I'm not going to fault anyone for the way they choose to cope. Because, again, we're seeing more horrible stuff happen every single day than human beings were really built for. We weren't built to see this much death. Honestly, especially considering the Z terror, we weren't built to see this many zombies. Zombies, glowing red eyes, a whole horde coming at you. It does something to the psyche that's hard to recover from. So yeah, I'm not going to fault anyone for their coping mechanisms. I am not going to say anything negative about anyone turning to, chemical help on that front. But when that chemical help endangers the rest of the community, it becomes a problem. And I can guarantee you, every community who has a rule against alcohol or drugs has that rule because something happened. An incident occurred. Just like most communities have the strip search rule, it's because somebody in that community saw what happens when a hidden bitten gets into a group of 20 or more people, and they barely survived. Most of these rules are created from trauma, are created from a horrible event in the past. So try to keep that in mind. Now, again, there are some cults out there. There are some places that have rules that are just bat guano crazy, but those aren't your places. Those aren't the communities for you. And those communities have a lot of people who are perfectly happy being in the cult, being where they are, and more power to them. The important thing is to find a place where you want to be happy, where you want to exist. So make sure when you're going to a community, you read the rules. And while you're in that community, even if it's just for a visit, please follow those rules. That community has those rules for a reason. And much like this frontier building, some of those rules may be location dependent. There may be things like an argon fire suppression system that you don't know about. And that's why a specific rule exists, literally or metaphorically speaking. So I was not a huge rule follower back in the world, but being part of this community and us coming up with various rules for our community, most of these rules are just to prevent mass death. They're to keep everyone alive. And on that note, if you're out there, survive, 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 and I'll be back next week, hopefully with more rules of chaos.